Hello, everyone, and good evening. Hi, I'm Lisa Krasner. I'm the Edward W. Kane Executive Director here at the Concord Museum, and we're so grateful you're all here tonight with us in the Churchill and Janet Franklin Lyceum. We also have virtual visitors tonight, so we're very prompt because we stream. And this will also be recorded and be on our YouTube channel for perpetuity. So it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's forum, which explores the beauty and wisdom of apple trees through words and images with artists I'm going to say this right, Harasamowicz, and Linda Hoffman. They're going to share their writings of conversations with an apple tree held on her orchard, Old Frog Pond Farm in Harvard. We will have some conversation tonight. And I think it's incredibly important to also note that we are sitting on an old apple orchard. This was Emerson's apple orchard with Emerson's house across the street. So this forum actually came about tonight. It was a really serendipitous conversation that I had with Ellen, waiting in a very long line at Cafe Nero maybe 6 months or so ago. We're in line for literally 15 to 20 minutes, as that can happen in an early morning. And we started discussing your work, and I was so intrigued, and I think you showed me some pictures online, and we exchanged cards, and I invited you in to come to the museum so we can discuss a possible program or some way to share your work. And Allison Schilling joined us, and between the two of them, plus Linda, they turned it into a program that we're about to experience tonight, and I'm very honored to introduce Ellen and Linda. So I will say Ellen began her career in documentary photography, working primarily for the Boston Globe, and later specialized in education and NGO photography. She has produced award-winning children's books about nature with publishers Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Henry Holt, Millbrook, and Charlesbridge. Assignments and personal projects have taken Ellen to more than 30 countries, including remote locations like Nagaland in Northeast India, where she photographed various ethnic groups, and the Andaman Sea in Myanmar, where her work focused on the Mogan, who traditionally have lived a semi-nomadic life on the water, but now must live on the land. During the pandemic, Ellen stayed close to home and documented the end of a small family farm in Still River, Massachusetts, after nearly 350 years. Currently, she's working on a project about apples with a local orchardist, writer, sculptor, and a more extensive project about 4 women who own and operate multi-generational orchards in her hometown of Harvard, Mass. And in 2022, Ellen received her MA in photography from Maine Media College. So now we'll turn to Linda Hoffman, who is an honors graduate of Bryn Mawr College with a degree in fine arts, and then she also studied at the Sorbonne. Linda was awarded a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship after graduating from college, where she trained for 2 years in the No Theater in Kyoto, Japan. A lifelong passion for poetry converged in 1981 with her work as a graphic artist in the form of her first sculpture, A Poem in Cloth, launching an extensive exploration of narrative sculpture, incorporating language, natural fibers, wood, stone, and found objects. In 1997, she began using old agricultural tools to create lyrical and poignant sculptures decrying New England's vanishing agricultural landscape. Represented in museums and private collections, Linda has public sculptures installed in towns and cities across the region. A contributor to WBUR's Cognoscente, Linda was a founding editor of Wild Apples, a journal of nature, art, and inquiry. She is the author of 3 chapbooks of art and poetry, and the letterpress art book, Winter Air, created in memory of her mother, Dr. Annette Weiner. The Artist in the Orchard, a memoir, is her first book. In 2006, 5 years after Linda and her 3 children moved into an old farmhouse with an abandoned orchard, Old Frog Pond Farm in Harvard, Massachusetts became the first organic pick-your-own orchard in Massachusetts. Now with more than 15 years of experience growing organic apples, Linda contributes to a holistic apple growers forum, teaches workshops, and is respected by an influential holistic apple growing community. Please join me in welcoming Ellen and Linda. Thanks so much.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. That was a great introduction. Thank you. It is remarkable. Oh, we don't have that up there, but it was up there before. We don't need it. It is remarkable how closely the history of the apple tree is connected with that of humanity. Henry David Thoreau, over 250 years ago. When I moved to Old Frog Pond Farm, which I named after a Japanese haiku, there was an abandoned orchard with poison ivy vines and brambles, and I think out of 400 trees, 100 were dead. And somehow I was moving there after a long marriage with 3 children, and I decided that I was somehow going to bring this orchard back. I didn't know, I'm a sculptor. I didn't know anything about apples. I didn't know anything about farming, but yes. And not only that, I was going to do it organically, even though I didn't really know what that meant. But that was it. And somehow that did happen. I met an incredible group of holistic, iconoclastic apple growers who meet still once a year for 24 hours and talk about apples. And each person has their own orchard and tries and experiments in different ways to grow holistic, sustainable, organic apples. And so my second year there, one of only 2 women, I brought a poem to read. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because when I was thinking about this introduction, I believe this poem is really the seed for this project. And Ellen doesn't even know this and hasn't heard this because I just thought of this today. And the poem is from the 14th century by Hafiz, the Persian poet. An apple tree was concerned about a late frost and losing its gifts that would help feed a poor family close by. Can't the clouds be generous with what falls from them? Can't the sun ration itself with precision? They can speak, trees. Battery? I'm back. They can sweetest things, but it takes special ears to hear them, ears that have listened to people with great care. So tonight we're going to hear just some excerpts from the working manuscript, Overheard in the Orchard. And it's a series of conversations between one golden delicious tree in our orchard and the orchardist that takes care of that orchard. When I was just beginning this project, Ellen arrived at the farm and said, "Linda, I loved reading your book, and I want a photograph in the orchard. Can I? Is that okay?" Of course I said yes. And then she said, "And you know, I want to express the whole world through an apple." And I thought, wow, that's so wonderful. And then I thought, well, I'll just tell her I'm starting to work on this project in the voice of one of my apple trees, and maybe this would come together. And so this is the first outing for this project in public this evening. So I will end here and let you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for the people who are Zooming in from home. I really appreciate that. So It was as if one might subtract all matter but the apple tree and still see in what remained the contours of the whole world. A quote from Daniel Mason in his book Northwoods, which if you haven't read it, it's super special. It's a fabulous book, and there's a lot about apples in it. So I've been a documentary photographer for about 20 years, but now I call myself a visual storyteller. So my early work on assignment for the Boston Globe or photographing for independent schools like the Fenn School here in Concord or Windsor or Groton didn't allow me to really go deep into the fine art of the documentary. And yes, I did make photos for 6 children's books, and that allowed me to work with a narrative. But I didn't want to just show people what I saw. I wanted them to feel something when they saw my work. So it was through long-term personal projects I was able to do this. My first project started about 20 years ago in Maine, photographing a lobsterman named John Olson. And if you've ever heard of the Olson House in Cushing, Maine, that's where Andrew Wyeth's famous painting was made of Christina. Christina was John's aunt, and he was born in that house and lived just down the way. So I photographed John for over 17 years, starting when he was 80 until he passed at the age of 97. And we became very good friends, and his family asked me to deliver his eulogy when he passed. So the connections I make with the people I photograph are very important to me. So about 4 years ago, I started photographing a small family farm in my hometown of Harvard, Massachusetts, called Willard Farm. So I'm drawn to people who live close to nature, people who have a very strong sense of community and who trust that nature will provide for them and their families. So I photographed Paul Willard, he's the main farmer, and then the others on the farm, some family members and others. And it was during COVID, so it was easy to drive just the few miles and spend time outside watching things grow while we were all privately suffocating in our homes. So I had been buying corn and tomatoes and pumpkins and flowers at the farm stand for over 30 years, so it was a very comfortable place for me. And it was early on in a conversation I had with Paul when he told me at the age of, in his late 70s, that he didn't know how much longer he could continue. So I really felt compelled to document this place with a history that goes back 10 generations, right back to Simon Willard, the very Simon Willard that was one of the first people who settled in Concord. So, and before Simon owned this property, it was the Nashaway people. So there was something unique about people who have lived for almost 350 years in one place, and it was coming to an end. So I wanted to document it. And this work was featured at Three Stones Gallery last May, and it was featured in Smithsonian Magazine. And sadly, when the show was up, the farm did close. But they did sell some tomato and pepper and basil plants this spring because they could make those in the greenhouse. And then they did have some gourds and some pumpkins available this fall that just happened to grow in the field. So getting back to apples, Harvard's known for its many fruit orchards, especially the apples, and I thought of doing a project in the orchards after the Willard project. And that's when I heard Linda speak, and I went to one of her book readings, The Artist in the Orchard. And I showed her the book that I made for Willard Farm. And I have a copy of it over there. I only made 3 copies, and there's one if you want to take a look at it later. And I asked her if I could photograph in her orchard, and then she told me about this manuscript she was working on. And so we decided to, let's try to do something together with the whole idea of apples, not knowing exactly what we were doing together, how it was going to work. But it's evolved over time. We've been working on it now for about a year and a half. Not quite a year and a half. It was May of last year. And my images when I started were color, but now they're silver toned that seem to relate more closely to the beautiful conversations Linda has written. So my images are not intended to illustrate Linda's conversations, so they don't necessarily line up. My images are meant to help the viewer feel what the orchard is like. And so for the purpose of this presentation, I'm showing you pictures that may not be part of this book that we plan to make together. And there's going to be a few where I just have one image for an extended period of time, and that's so you can fully concentrate on the stories that Linda's telling you. So I will turn it over to Linda now, so thank you.
And Thank you for the glasses. One, dormant whispers. I am an apple tree. I live in an orchard with 24 rows of trees. I come from a long line of apple trees reaching back eons. Harvest is over. Only a few small apples hang from my branches. My once green leaves are brown, dry, and insect gnawed. I shake them off. They served me well, transforming sunlight into nourishment and shielding my unprotected branches from sun scald. Now is the time to slow down. My only concern, to prepare for winter. Frost and snow will soon arrive. The soft belly of earth under my branches will harden over. My fruit buds are set for next year. That happened months ago in midsummer, when this year's apples were the size of oak galls. This morning I shiver. My bark is ice glazed. Every single bud is jeweled in frost. Winter's cold could harm these buds, but I am prepared. After my last apples fell, my sugars became a thick, oozy syrup coating the inside of every branch. The warm layer protects my buds during my dormant season, my chill time. Without this chill time, these cold hours, my fruit buds do not open. Without enough chill time, my budding is haphazard, my blossoms weak. Slowing down prepares me for flowering. Silence concentrates vigor. A good long chill produces a more bountiful crop. Two, winter pruning. I have an orchardist. She and her friend prune my branches in midwinter. They walk in circles round and round and round my trunk, contemplating structure, height, and new growth. They use long-handled loppers to trim branches and handsaws for larger cuts. My twig tips used to constrict when I saw them walking toward me, but now I relax. They remove what no longer serves, make room for the new, and prepare openings for sunlight to ripen my fruit. When they first approach, they always ask, "Where is the central leader?" They examine me closely. They want to make sure I have a main focus for my spring growth. Sometimes it is true, a branch becomes larger than my main trunk, my central leader stops growing, I lose my way, I become off kilter. When a large branch was leaning toward the setting sun, my orchardist climbed to the crown of my canopy. She pulled her saw from its leather scabbard. The blade pressed my bark, and then came the rasp as she pulled and pushed back and forth through sapwood and into my denser hardwood. The sawing seemed like it would never end until, with a great thud, the branch fell to the ground. When my orchardist and her friend finished with their cuts and clips, they stood back and gazed attentively. She said, "This is a beautiful tree." But I know she says this about all of us. 3 silver tip reflections. After pruning, my heartwood warms and sap starts to trickle. My fruit buds begin to swell. The papery brown scales at each bud tip separate, and a speck of silver appears. Most people do not see this slight change, but as my orchardist walks down the rows, she notices this hint of our awakening. Pausing at one of my branches, she slides her fingertips up the length of a twig. She is familiar with both flower and leaf buds. She reads them like a forgotten script, follows the calligraphy of an ancient prayer. I hear her murmur, "Silver tip, bud growth emerging." Then season, tender, blossoming. For early spring, my orchardist puts down her white bucket of tools and sits on my lowest branch. She looks up, gazing through the crown of my branches to the rootless clouds. Watching her makes me recall my ancestors. Apple trees originated in the foothills of a heavenly mountain range. The tallest peaks were always cloud-covered. Fox, snow leopards, and wolves and mountain sheep roamed freely. In the fall, these animals feasted on our apples. Then my orchardist spoke. My ancestors felt the presence of the divine when they gathered in apple orchards. They called apple orchards Shekinah. It means dwelling. They considered the orchard to be the dwelling place of the creative force of the universe. I knew her ancestors understood an orchard is sacred, a place to taste truth. Five, green tip revelations. My fruit buds are no longer at silver tip, but starting to show their first hint of green. My orchardist calls it green tip. I see her walking with her little brown dog. She sits on my lowest branch again, and my sap tingles. She opens a book and reads. The king returned to the island of Avalon after his last battle. Avalon is an old Welsh word that means the island of apples. I told her long ago my ancestors lived on this island. Apple trees pass on their recollections to their descendants. I can recall the day 9 tall figures carried this man from the barge to a golden dais built for him near the orchard. He was gravely ill, suffering from a deep wound to his head. They called him Arthur. For days they tried to heal his wound with salves, potions, and prayers. They tried to make him comfortable on a mound of embroidered silk quilts, but he continued to moan. Even the applewood wands carried by his eldest caretakers were powerless to help him. It seemed like he was still fighting. Then his face changed. His breathing quieted. Great cries erupted. The sound of weeping traveled through the trees until the entire island was one deep lament. He was a compassionate king who was betrayed at the end of his life. It was a sad time in Avalon. Did you have an orchardist when you grew in Avalon? When we grew in Avalon, we did not have an orchardist. We lived in groves on the edge of forests among lush patches of herbs, nettles, valerian, St. John's wort, comfrey, and burdock. The tall-robed ones, you call them women, harvested the herbs, and sometimes they poured elixirs over our roots. They danced and chanted. They celebrated the movements of the sun and the waning and waxing of the moon. These women also cared for the bees who lived in hollows between rocks and sometimes in the cavities of old trees. They harvested honey by reaching into the hive and drawing out dripping handfuls. The bees were not afraid of the women, and the women were not afraid of the bees. Women officiated in Avalon. It isn't like that here. The women were always kind to the trees. Seven, slowly to unfold. Who are your young friends? The littlest one is quite a tree climber. Louie. Her given name is Lucia, though sometimes we call her Lou or Lulu. The older one is more careful. Her name is Vida. I was glad Vida warned her friend not to climb on my thin branches. They're my granddaughters. They're visiting for school vacation. Louie likes the colored ribbons you have on your branches from our winter wassail celebration. She yanked two off and tied one around her wrist and the other around her ankle. They should come for a wassail. When I lived in Avalon, the islanders always held an orchard wassail in the middle of winter. They sang, drank cider, and toasted the apple trees. The children hung toast with colorful yarn on every tree. I learned about wassailing from reading Henry David Thoreau's essay, Wild Apples. He says the tradition of hanging toast on yarn from the branches was to feed the robins, the guardian spirits of the orchard. Wassailing brings cheer during the cold season. Sometimes I stare at my bark and I see how I am aging, peeling, perforated by insects, dry, calloused, brittle. I feel the same. My hair is gray and my skin is dry. She opened her book and read a poem by a Taoist woman, Li Ye. My mind is a distant drifting cloud. I know it won't return. It lives with clouds in the space between existing and the void. I often follow the drifting clouds and feel a little bereft when I look up and see not a one, only the endless and vast nothingness until a crow, goose, or heron flies by. Is there more? Why do gusting winds scatter it about, blowing back and forth from the southern to the northern mountains? The melody of the words shimmered my leaves. I was lost in reverie when she called out, "Louie, Vida!" I could just see them in the top of the highest tree in the back of the orchard. She went off to find them. 11. I recall a man named John Chapman. We call him Johnny Appleseed. John Chapman was his birth name. He was born only a crow's short flight from here. He loved apple trees. He came to be known as Johnny Appleseed because he planted countless apple trees. We share stories about him. He picked up seeds from a cider mill and planted the pips far and wide. He was always barefoot. He avoided wearing leather because he did not believe in harming living beings. He planted the seeds in groves near a stream or river. He fenced them in with brambles. He would return and check on them. Sometimes he dug them up and carried them to other parts, but not before spreading more seeds in their place. With water and light, our seedlings grow as tall as you in one season. I'm not tall. No, you are not, but tall for one season of growth. He sold the trees to settlers who fermented the fruit into hard cider. It was their drink of choice morning and evening. Johnny Appleseed is also remembered for his religious beliefs. He followed a religion based on the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg, a Swedish mystic, scientist, and theologian who taught that the sacred reveals itself in subtle ways in our daily lives. In a drop of water and a wildflower, in a honeybee and an apple seed. When Chapman visited homesteads, he pulled out a book and read passages. Sometimes he would tear out a few pages and leave them, and then exchange them for new ones the next time he passed through. Apple trees reveal the sacred. Our branches and roots connect with worlds more distant than you can see and closer than you can imagine. John Chapman knew that apple trees hold mysteries. Do you ever write down the mysteries you find in apple trees? 12. Mid-May tribulations. Golden Delicious. The temperatures dropped to 31 degrees Fahrenheit last night. I recall the weekend in mid-February when it was so icy we heard the peaches tapping all night long. Every single blossom died. Not one survived. Well, how are your buds? Most of my buds are all right, but some of the other trees' buds froze, mostly toward the back of the orchard where it dips into the wetlands. These abrupt changes in temperature are not good for us. The earth is changing. Trees have been on the earth for a long, long time. Did you know there was once a big dying? Almost all trees perished. This could happen again. Much later, humans arrived. Then you started to cut us down to build huts. And then there were more and more of you. And you cut down more and more of us. You cleared forest after forest. Trees shared the horrifying news of each massacre. Towering trunks lay on the ground, their sap still pulsing. Great swaths of the world were crisscrossed with fallen branches. Humans didn't yet know how much we depend on trees for the air we breathe. Now that you know, why do you continue to cut us down? That's a great question. Well, we're self-centered and short-sighted. We have endless desires. We are all guests on this small, round orb, and trees take care of each other. Mostly, we connect through our roots. If a tree needs a nutrient, we give it. If we do not have it, we alert another to the need, and we release scents to keep pests at bay and help weaker trees defend themselves. Sometimes we develop a particular relationship with a tree who is struggling. Golden Delicious, listen, and she opened her book and read. Plants are attuned to one another's strengths and weaknesses, elegantly giving and taking to attain exquisite balance. Who wrote that? Suzanne Simard, a botanist who intuitively knew about trees and how they share nutrients. For years, no one believed her. The scientific community made fun of her. Only recently did science prove she was right. This botanist must know we give generously to our community day and night, and always when we are preparing for our death. However, our real connection is even greater. There is a force in the orchard that helps us grow. This energy connects the atmosphere with the soil. About 10 years ago, we spread a ton of rock dust around the trees. Basalt, do you remember? I watched you carry bucket after bucket. The basalt adds minerals. The fungi in the soil gather the minerals and feed your roots. It also increases the paramagnetism in the soil. What you call paramagnetism flows through our roots and into every leaf, branch, and apple. This is the mystery, the magic. We are rooted in the soil, but energetically, we are always in motion. We flow like water. We fly like a bird. We breathe like a mountain. So that's where we're going to stop. So you've had a taste, and we're going to open it up for questions. Do I want to what? Sure. We have an Instagram that we do together. Ellen sends me a photo, and I write a haiku. And so if you'd like to follow, it's apple_poetica. And thank you again to the museum and Lisa and Allison.
I guess we'll go over here. You feel so far away.
Come in closer.
So we're happy to answer any questions you might have for us.
I have a question. I wanted to start a permaculture layering of fruit tree, of apples, strawberries high up because my little creatures love to go get them early, and then and raspberries, which would be around them, vice versa, depending how I can do them. And I'd like to get some old apples. And don't know where. I would love to visit the farm and see how it all happens. I think there was something on Chronicle recently about organic apples and a grower. I wondered if it was you, but I have such a good memory. So I would love more information about that. And do you take cuttings? Do you replace them? How do you keep it going? And where do you find that calmness to have those words come out of you?
There's a lot of questions there. The first thing that you said about the strawberries being up high, the critters will go after them no matter what. They will climb the tree.
Oh, it's not the critter, it is the critter, who is the sweetest,
Gro-
most damning woodchuck I know. And he just comes up, and he's very gracious.
But woodchucks climb trees.
Well, he will come up.
Anyway, but
I've seen him, but I also have sacrificial plants for him because he
Okay.
stay well balanced.
good. There are certain nurseries, and if you even want to write down the name, Cummins Nursery, Cummins, has many, 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 many apple trees. I don't know, probably 600 varieties. And when you buy apple trees from a place like that, you not only buy the apple tree, the variety, and they'll be in groups of, heirloom, disease resistant, red fleshed, all kinds of different apple trees. But you also choose the rootstock. And you can have either a standard, which takes maybe 10 years till it bears fruit, or you can go for a semi-standard, half size kind of, or you can go for dwarf where you need to support it always, but you get fruit much more quickly. There's also rootstocks that are better for clay soils, or so there's a lot of different information that you can find out, and then you can choose.
The good part is that apples have grown on this land before, and strawberries. So, and I don't just store better, and I have an organic yard, so I figured I've got
You do. That's a good start. Yeah, that's great. So you'll plant a few, I assume, trees.
yes. And the peace, your peace and your solitude and your quiet.
A lot of meditation. And we have meditation in my studio 3 mornings a week. Yeah. Yeah, Lisa.
Question for Ellen. Ellen, your photos, of course, are beautiful as always.
Thanks.
At what point in your project did you decide that black and white was going to be the way to go with it? And how did that change when you approached your
Yeah, thanks for the question. Lisa asked, for those of you on Zoom who may not have heard her question, why I chose to do silver-toned images instead of color. And I did have some color, and I'll explain that in a moment. So when I was reading Linda's manuscript, to me it was there was an abstract quality to it. And black and white images are an abstraction of reality. So the whole idea of black and white just seemed to really fit. Color is such a powerful thing that it just overwhelms. And I wanted the images to really be in concert with the words. But you'll notice that I have the apples in color, because to me, they're portraits of apples. And the apples, I'm elevating the apples. And so in a book, for instance, I see the apples being printed on like a vellum. And then everything else would just be the silver-toned images and the words. And they would have a different quality to really elevate the whole idea of the apple. So that's why I made that choice.
Is silver print, they seem much more detailed.
Well,
Can you explain the difference between silver print and black and white?
yeah, so they're actually black and white images, but I use the term silver tone, but what they really are is more like a duotone. So it's not just a pure black and white. I added a little bit of color to it, just a slight bit to warm them up, to make them not just pure, like a cold black and white. So I refer to them as silver tone, but duotone is another way of saying that.
Is that on are they computerized or are
Oh yeah, they're all digital images. Yeah. Thank you. It's just a way to soften the images. Yeah.
in some ways it's also harder because you see all the detail?
Yeah. And there's a lot more detail than you can see on a screen too. So, but I printed some of the images in color. I have a number of images I didn't show you that I absolutely love, like of birds' eggs and the baby birds, and one of Linda holding a moth. And in color, the moth image is beautiful, but in silver toned, it's much more beautiful. Like that moth is everything. So color is a powerful thing, but it is more rooted in reality. So by putting it in the silver tone to make it more black and white, it does have that abstract quality, so you're just looking at form.
And I think heavier too. Color is like heavier because you're absorbing it in different ways.
Right.
Black and white is just so pure, and in a way it matches your
Yeah.
simplicity of your words, which are just also exquisite.
Yeah. That's the whole purpose, yes.
Kind of a nerdy question.
How do I repeat that question? um, so it's a reference to my mention of paramagnetism, which is kind of an esoteric, what? Steiner, and you know, when I mentioned earlier the sort of a lot of growers who are going outside the sort of commercial way of growing, I think have a spiritual connection to the soil and real respect for all the creatures. I mean, I think of them, the creatures in the soil, as the real farmers, right? They're doing so much, and so much is important the way from, we don't really know. I guess that's the thing, and I don't know. But certainly rocks are alive in that way, the minerals, and their attraction. And we know that when you do a soil sample, you get positive and negative. Different minerals are positive and different ones are negative. And and I'm not a chemist or a scientist at all, but I do know that like you need certain ones with the others, and they cling or they don't, or they repel. And all of that is that kind of electrical and unseen connection. Maybe I'll leave it there.
You mentioned Shekinah and this connection to apple orchards, I don't know, from biblical times. You want to talk a little bit more about that? What you're referring to is something the tree was saying, well, I connect them to my ancestors back in, I'm assuming it's biblical or Middle East or Israel.
So the question was a reference to the biblical times when I said Shekinah. My ancestors referred to the orchard as Shekinah. That word does refer to the creative force of the universe, and it is the Hebrew word for orchard, which is quite amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think orchards were really important in, you always had an orchard in a village. I mean, that was just part, by definition. You were growing food, and you were growing fruit. And there's something magical about fruit, right? Because it's so sweet and it's such a gift. And they're perennial. They live long time. Think of olive trees, 500 years, right?
Given the number of varieties of apples in your orchard, how did you choose Golden Delicious?
Good question. The branch. No, you answer.
The question is, given all the different varieties of apples in our orchard, why did I choose Golden Delicious? And it was, as Ellen has just said, and maybe you can even put that up there. That tree has this just beautiful branch, and I do refer to it at some point in the text because I called it my bench as the orchardist, and then the tree also refers to it as her bench. And I don't think, oh, you did show a picture. I was sitting on it. Okay, but it has this long, beautiful, low branch. So that's really, yeah, what a question, because I haven't thought about that. But that's it.
And when Linda told me that she was going to write about one particular tree, and she gave me some like rough directions on how to find it, but it was so obvious because that branch, it's just the perfect height. It's long. I mean, she can stretch out on it, so I knew exactly which tree she was referring to.
What's remarkable is the balance.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a body on this branch, and it's bleeding a little bit, but it's saying, I can do this.
And apple trees, they're just so exquisite. To me, apple trees in the winter are so beautiful. To me, they look like dancers. And you may remember the picture I showed of the bark earlier. To me, that looked like a woman's torso. You saw that? Good. I was hoping so. But I just think the apple tree is just spectacular in all seasons.
It's interesting because I saw a chick and a baby,
Oh,
the mother.
okay. That's great. Yes.
Do you, are your apples commercially distributed, or you must have a lot of trees?
The question was, are the apples commercially distributed? And they're all sold at our farm stand or pick your own. And because there's so few organic apple growers, and we are the only pick your own organic apple grower, we get picked out.
I just want to add that these are the most delicious apples I've ever had. Seriously, the flavor, you know, just can't compare it. And you know when you go into a grocery store and you get an apple and it's got that disgusting wax coating? Then none of that. And these may not be the prettiest apples as you saw from the images I showed, but they taste amazing. The flavor is dense.
So when are you picked out by? For next fall, we should come earlier.
We get picked out early. So, yeah, last weekend. Yeah.
And when do you start with
Right. Oh, the pristine, we start in August, mid-August. We have some early apples.
Just for an FYI, Botanical Garden at Tower Hill had a show, and I don't know if they do it every year, but they had over 150 heirloom trees, and they had samples of all these apples. And some are tiny and ugly as sin, and some are beautiful, but the most best ones are the ones that have all kind of little things on them. They're not the perfect apple, you know. And it's, I encourage anybody, just, it's amazing to go there because you go, who knew there were that many apples?
Who knew there were that many apples? There are probably 12,000 documented varieties.
and counting?
Yeah. 15. Yeah. 20,000 alone. We have time for, yes.
How many varieties did you find when you first bought your property, and what choices did you make to bring new ones? Like, why did you select new ones as you bought them on the property?
So the question was, what varieties did I find when I moved to the property? And then what did I do to bring and make, how did I make the choices? So there were 5 varieties when I moved there. There was Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Blushing Golden, Macallan, and Cortland. And there were a lot of Red Delicious. And so when I when I went to that first holistic apple meeting and mentioned that I had Red Delicious, no one said anything. But later, John Bunker, some of you might know his name. He is. Did I do it again? Hello? He's like the apple whisperer in Maine. Amazing. And he comes through here. Anyway, he came over to me afterwards and said, I often am in Concord, and I would be happy to come and show you how to top work your Red Delicious trees. So that's what I did. And we have maybe just 3 Red Delicious in the orchard right now. But you can top work a tree, which is you cut it off. So you have a big trunk coming up, and you can actually, you're cutting it off, but you're leaving a nurse limb or 2 coming out. And then around that flat disc area, that top, you're going to put little pieces of scionwood around it. Scionwood is first year growth, cut in February, stored in your fridge, taken out in May, and then you need only a couple buds on each little tiny piece. And then you can put it around the tree, down into the bark, make contact with the cambium layer, and they will grow. And they will grow 3 feet in that first season.
And they must put down roots.
Well, I just wanted to mention the picture I showed near the end of Linda with the tree. She basically looked like she was embracing the tree, that they were one. That's what she was doing. She was grafting a piece of scion wood. So in our book, you'll find out that can I give it away? That the Golden Delicious apple tree, she was telling the tree about how there's another apple in the orchard, the Almada, that has red flesh. And the Golden Delicious asks to have some red flesh. So she's grafting that apple scion wood onto that Golden Delicious. So when will we see that?
It will probably take a few years, 3 years maybe, if those grafts grow well, to have red apples then dangling here and there among the yellow Golden Delicious apples.
Scion cuts put their chemistry or whatever into the host tree, and it somehow mingles.
So all apple trees are grafted, every single one, and so the rootstock determines size, resistant to fire blight and other diseases maybe, but mostly it's about size. And then the above is your scionwood that determines the variety. So you can have an apple tree with 250 varieties of apples.
And I know that Libby here has how many varieties on one tree? 9, 10. On one tree, 9 or 10 different varieties. That's great.
So is it S-I-O-N, like the scion of a family?
Scion. Yeah.
How much care does an apple tree require for an organic grower, the minimum amount of care to bear healthy fruit?
I don't know. I have 2 of our farmers here. How would you? The question was, how much care does an apple tree need to, in a season, right, to bear good fruit? What would you say, Isa?
They need maybe to be present because they know what they need to do.
To be present, you mean? For the person, they need that orchardist to be there. They need attention. Apple trees are kind of, they've been domesticated, shall we say, for so many years that they don't really thrive on their own unless they're a seedling and a wild apple. They need, you can strengthen, and I feel like that's what we do, is we're always trying to improve the soil and to build their immune system. We spray compost teas that have nettles and comfrey and horsetail equisetum to give them nutrients. Those are plants that we grow on the farm. We try to limit, that's the thing, like if when an orchard, when trees are used to getting chemical fertilizers, then it's almost like they're used to like IV drips, you can almost imagine. So there's a transition when you change to organic growing, I think, and it can be kind of just difficult in the beginning because you really have to you're changing the tree, you're improving their health through and through, cellularly.
Did you know you had to do that when you bought the property?
The question was, did I know I had to do that when I bought the property? I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I couldn't identify the trees, I really didn't. But I met great people, and, it's...
How long ago was that?
I moved in 2001. We became certified in 2006. Yeah.
Was there arsenic in the soil, as most of our orchards have had?
Was there arsenic in the soil? No. No. It was a much newer, the prior owners had planted the orchard, so it was newer. Yeah.